Good morning. It is Monday, May 23rd, 2022, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Okay, since we last talked, the Hard Red Winter Wheat Tour wrapped up. India scaled back its wheat export ban. Indonesia got back in the palm oil export business, but Malaysia has halted the export of 3.6 million chickens. The global food scares are likely to intensify in the week ahead. White House advisors were thrown for a loop by President Joe Biden over the weekend. We'll talk more about that. And early voting won the Preakness. Epicenter finished second for the second time in a Triple Crown race. And Justin Thomas started the final day of the PGA Championship, 7 strokes from the top of the leaderboard, and wrapped it up with a tap-in par to win the championship. Jim Wiesemeyer, Pro Farmer Policy Analyst. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Well, we had 95-degree weather over the weekend, but we got a cold front, and boy, did we get some needed rains.
Well, we got a little bit of rain at the end of last week, but it knocked our temperatures back. It was a cool weekend. It's cool again. We went from within 48 hours, we went from furnace to air conditioner, and now we're back to running the furnace here in Northeast
that time
Iowa.
of year, I guess.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Good morning, everyone. Glad that you are with us. I'm AgriTalk host Chip Flory. As we go throughout this morning's conversation, there's a comments tab on your screen. If you want to be part of the conversation, just click on that comments tab, and Jim and I will be watching for it as time goes on. There's Melody again already this morning. Good morning. All right. Jim, let's start with one that we had talked about for quite some time, and we finally got some details on it last week. WIP Plus is now the Emergency Relief Program.
Yes, ERP, as we call it, ERP. And about $6 billion is going to go out for eligible 2020 and 2021 crops, Chip. Much needed based on all the emails I get on this. And this is phase 1. So phase 2 will come out later. But it looks like they did some of the tweaking that will be positive. So I think they're learning about this program.
Yeah, and phase 2, it basically, if you don't get a payment in phase 1, they'll figure out a way to get you a payment in phase 2, is what it looks like to me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're using available data now, much like they did for the livestock sector, if you recall. So this is getting to be kind of a mature program, if you will.
Yes, it is. Phase 2 of the program could push total payments, as I understand it, up to $10 billion. So this is not an insignificant program, Jim. This is one that's going to add to net farm income in 2022.
Yes, it will. Recall that Congress authorized $10 billion last September, combined crop and livestock, Chip. So yeah, that's a chunk of change there.
Right. Okay. Another one that happened last week that I think is important is Growth Energy and EPA have reached a deal on the 2023 renewable fuel standards and renewable volume obligation timeline. So by the time we get to this fall, we're going to have a good idea of what that 2023 program is going to look like. Shouldn't we?
You would hope. It takes an energy group, in this case, Growth Energy, to sue the EPA just to follow what they're supposed to do. But that's the world we live in now. So they were upset that they were already behind in setting the ethanol mandate for 2023. And that's the first year EPA has a relatively free hand in drafting the regulation, Chip. So the consent decree would resolve that complaint and would oblige the EPA to propose the RVOs by September the 16th this year and finalize it by April 23rd next year.
Right. Okay. We are also coming up very quickly on June 3rd, which is when EPA is expected to deliver. Is it the final rule or the proposed final rule on blending obligations for 2022?
I think it's the final.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And
we
they're
should be
meeting
getting
with the
that.
last of the groups this week, Chip. So they're gearing up. So we'll finally get it. Although, as we discussed on AgriTalk Friday, EPA Administrator Michael Regan is giving mixed signals again.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to wait to see this bona fide announcement.
That's right. Now the mixed signals um, go go back to the SRE request. There's 60 some that are still pending. Those are expected to be thrown out, and I think that is still the message that we're getting from
Yes.
EPA. But what he told AgriTalk listeners, what, 3 weeks ago now, was what he said. I went back and listened to it. Was he said that there's no guarantee that the flexibility on the on meeting those expired obligations, that the refiners would have an alternative route to compliance. Said there was no guarantee of that. That's all he said.
Yes.
So they're trying to find some way somehow to give refiners some flexibility on those blending obligations, Jim.
Small refiners, however
Yes.
they define it. Yes.
Yeah.
It seems like, and he said the line, they want to stay, or they have to stay within the confines of the law. I think
Right.
that's always interesting to say. So yeah, it's a little murky here now. So we're going to have to wait to see the actual words.
Right. Right. Okay. Aaron's got a question for you, Jim. And it is question two: why is there no linkage requirement for the ELRP for livestock grazing versus for the crop side? There are great RMA programs for cattle producers to buy rainfall insurance for grazing. There really are. The pasture and rangeland coverage. It really is a heck of a good program.
So this person is suggesting a mandate then that if you get this program, you have to comply with that other program, as I understand it.
No,
Right?
I think what he is suggesting is if you've got that coverage, if you've got the pasture and rangeland coverage, why can't there be an ERP for livestock tied to that?
Oh, I will check into that. That's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll check into it.
Legit. All right. Another thing on Friday, judge on Friday, boy, kind of just in the nick of time, really, halted the administration's plans to lift Title 42. So the administration was going to lift Title 42 today, and that has been put off at least for a little while.
Yes, and the Justice Department did appeal the case, but as we talked about on AgriTalk Friday, it looks like the judge in this case is going to bail out the administration from what would have been a major boost in the number of undocumented or illegal immigrants coming across that border beginning today. So I think this punts it until after the November 8th elections.
Okay. All right. Very good. One more from last week. A lot of talk that the U.S. is ready to take Canada to court over the TRQs. What's the status there?
We may well know Thursday. That's when USDA Secretary Vilsack appears before the Senate Ag Committee, Chip. And it's almost like looking at a commodity chart. You can almost predict it. He likes to break news. So at the time he said, stay tuned. I know the White House, both U.S. Trade Rep and Vilsack is being pressured to get aggressive on Canada. And a number of other countries have been complaining about their dairy policy now. So we could see an announcement this week, Jeff.
Okay, let's go to the weekend because it was quite the active weekend, Jim. We got to start with the big one, the big gaffe over the weekend. President Biden in Japan was asked if the U.S. would intervene militarily if China would move on Taiwan, and President Biden said yes.
Yeah, he said the U.S. military would intervene to defend Taiwan from any attack from China. Then the comment was quickly walked back by the White House, who later said Biden simply meant the U.S. would provide equipment rather than troops should China invade. Now, Chip, that if you were briefing the president on his major trip to Japan and other Asian countries, South Korea, etc., this issue was going to come up. So again, it's like preparing for a political debate. You just should know the response, but yet he bollocksed it.
Yeah. The optics on this are terrible, Jim.
Not good.
It's it's absolutely terrible. We've and that I've been growing increasingly frustrated with Joe Biden's lack of you can't trust him to be a leader.
No, I think Elon Musk nailed it the last week when he said, "He who controls the teleprompter controls this country's leadership." And I don't know who's writing everything for him, but in many cases, and I hate to say this, it's not the president himself.
No, that's right. That's right. Okay. Anything else to say on that?
Well, we've got all sorts of analysis out this morning. I noticed in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere on the U.S.-China phase one agreement, who won, et cetera. And I thought the best quote they had in it was, neither country won, but other than Vietnam, they were the big winner of that trade spat between the U.S. and China. So I thought that was interesting. And then now over the weekend, we have the Davos, is that how you pronounce it? Conference.
Yeah.
And a host of leaders are going to be there. So that's going to make some news. We've already got the International Monetary Fund saying that they'll likely have to trim their forecast for economic growth this year for a number of countries in the world. And then you've got Ukraine's president speaking there today. So they're going to have a number of world leaders at that event in person for the first time in several years, Chip.
Okay. The questions and the comments are starting to stack up, but I want to continue on this line of conversation here for just a moment. You mentioned that there's some consideration by the Biden administration to remove the tariffs on China that were put on by the Trump administration.
Yes.
At the same time, the Biden administration announced that a dozen Indo-Pacific countries will join the U.S. in a sweeping economic initiative designed to counter China's influence in the region. How do those two things fit together?
Nobody said government has to be consistent. This shows you some internal battles, however. There's the State Department is wanting to lighten up on these tariffs, but you've got U.S. Trade Rep Catherine Tai saying no, that she'll lose her leverage, whatever they have, on China in ongoing trade talks. So most of the people tell me Biden wants to have those tariffs lifted. And that on Friday and again this morning led to higher calls for the U.S. equity markets, Chip. So they must think it's good news.
Okay.
But as far as the Indo-Pacific partnership, it's really a framework. It's not a bona fide trade agreement, but it does constitute around 40% of the GDP of the world. And as you said, that it's really directed against China, and it doesn't include Taiwan, even though some lawmakers, such as Senator Grassley, wanted it to include Taiwan. But they excluded Taiwan because they didn't want to upset China. That's basically what the briefers, said about it. But it's really an announcement. It doesn't, I don't think, have much effectiveness. We don't even know whether there's there's no dispute resolution, at least that they've announced that's part of it. But it's their marquee accomplishment of Biden's first trip to Asia, Australia, India, Japan. so, et cetera, as far as those countries being included, Chip.
Okay. Okay. Um, USDA Secretary Vilsack was there when the plane loaded with 35 tons of baby formula arrived in Indianapolis or Indiana yesterday. Now it's a special baby formula for infants, toddlers that are intolerant to some of the proteins in cow's milk. So it's not going onto the shelves. It's going to be delivered directly to those families. Uh, it's some progress in resolving the issues, but I I gotta believe that not they've got the ball rolling on this. They're going to be trying to make some quick progress, won't they?
And I think they are, to be honest. They announced also that an additional flights to import that formula are coming in the next few days. So I think they're getting a handle on it. Again, the fault was that they've known this for months and they just
Yeah,
didn't act. And Vilsack's going to be, because USDA is part of this, and this is why he was in Indianapolis Sunday, to visibly see that airline coming in on it, and more ahead. And Vilsack obviously will talk about this Thursday at the Senate Ag Committee hearing.
I caught him on the Today Show, and he said, "Listen, we acted as quickly as we could."
Yes, yeah.
I
Once they show.
I don't know how that's acting as quickly as they could.
Well, as I said before, when you have a political issue involving baby formula, you had to act 2 days prior to a problem occurring. So again, you wonder what is going on in the administration strategy sessions, Chip, or the lack of them.
Right.
It's just amazing.
All right. Gary's got a couple of good ones here, Jim. Number one, is the baby food shortage the first time in American history that we required assistance for food?
It's the first time we required what?
Assistance for food.
Oh, out of the from the U in the U.S. Uh, you know,
I've been
I
ever
can't
since
think
I
of any
read it,
other
I've been
time.
trying to come up with another time.
No, no.
I
Toilet
well
paper, but not food.
paper, but not food. We'll do a little research on that,
That
Gary. But
again shows you the feeling, not just in the U.S. but around the world, of how the system of checks and balances on supplies has broken down.
yeah.
It just, and it's getting people more than upset. I don't care whether you're
Oh,
Democrat or Republican. It's just, these are the things you saw in third world countries for many years, and it's happening
and it's
here. But
happening.
that shows you the logistics system that just in time, that we've discussed many times, it's broken. And so now it's going to take a while for it to come back, and it will. And I think it'll be a better system, actually, that we source it either from the US, but I think in
Oh,
countries like
yeah,
Mexico, I am very optimistic about how this is going to help Mexico.
okay. All right. Very good. Second one from Gary. Is Washington starting to wake up to how ESG scoring, environmental social governance scoring, can be weaponized against a company like Elon Musk's?
Yes, they are, and they should have before. And a number of farm groups, led by, in this case, National Pork Producers Council, they were early on in telling their individual companies' membership that what this could mean to portions of the ag sector. So, yeah, these are the tools that certain people use, that they can do it administratively, Chip. And this is a very aggressive leader in the Securities and Exchange Commission. So he wants to yield with a big fork, if you will.
Right. Okay. Another comment from Gary, I think, is important to add here. Gary says, currently, I'm aware of over 20 states that have or are taking up anti ESG regulations. Um, let's see. the best one is they're stripping out pension funds from being invested in pro ESG companies. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, now with this downturn in the marketplace, I mean, and it's more than a downturn, it's a bloodbath. You're seeing the return of most officials in companies to focus on growth rather than being married to this ESG themselves. You know, in other words, they need to focus on their business at hand. That a number of companies got waylaid into these other social issues, and it's not been all that great for stockholders.
Right.
So again,
Okay.
the thrust of the question, I think, is correct.
Yeah.
I think it's reached a peak. This is one of the avenues that the administration has been using, means to an end, and this is the climate change. There, and remember when Biden first came in, he did not hide anything on this. They will do whatever they think that they need to do. The whole of government to come after
Whole of
this issue,
government.
and this is part of it. The ESG is.
Yep. Yeah. It's it leads us down the path of the kind of conversation that we had on Friday on the free for all on Agri Talk about energy prices, Jim.
Yeah, whether or not when the Interior Secretary would not answer whether or not she thought current prices were too high, leading some to conclude they just want these higher prices. Criticism by some, not all, to encourage people to go more biofuels, electric vehicles, etc. And
Yeah.
there's certain contingency in the government to take more than a few whacks at the crude oil industry, automobiles as we know them, etc. So that plays right into that.
Yeah. Energy Secretary Granholm just came right out and said it,
Yes,
that the high fuel prices should be encouraging, accelerating our movement to clean energy.
yes. At least I like a person like her that doesn't finesse. You know, at least you know where she's coming from. But yeah, this is their modus operandi.
It's the agenda. It's the agenda, and we're all part of it.
Yeah.
There's no you can't not be part of it when what is happening to energy prices is happening.
Well, this is why energy companies don't want to invest the billions of dollars they typically did every year in exploration,
Yeah.
just proposing new pipelines, whatever, leases, because they don't have any confidence that they can attract the financing chip as a result of this deadlock on them by the Biden administration. From
Yeah.
hour one, they were against the crude oil industry, and they've done nothing to change that attitude.
It's one of the reasons that the RFS reset concerns me now more than before, because um, if we would see that positive RFS reset going forward, which Michael Regan told us was going to happen, um, it would suggest that the lifeline, the timeline on liquid fuels and combustible engines is being extended.
Yes, and you have to watch out. There's a lot of details to come on this reset. How did they deal with the electric cars? What are
Yeah.
the stipulations on them? What do they give them as opposed to like a RIN, a
Yeah.
RIN for an electric vehicle? These are important decisions. They're legitimate decisions, but we need to know. And usually Congress gets involved on this one, but they have taken their hands off of this issue. And Regan confirmed that to us when
Yeah.
we asked him, "Are you surprised?" And he said he was. So
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
no consensus in Washington on this in Congress. You can imagine with the
Right.
crude oil states versus the biofuel states, et cetera, where they could both come together, I think personally, to help each other, but we're not in that mode yet.
Right. Right. Nate made a comment here that and I just want to emphasize that this is a point that Jim has made. I've made it. We've been consistent in this. He says the problem of this agenda is there is no thought at all about how we are going to become green. And to Jim's point, the cost is unreal to get there. Yeah, we've made that point, that exact point, many times.
Yeah, it's like they wanted to go to transition to green energy in 1 year, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to take minimum of a decade, minimum of
Oh,
a decade. So this is why you don't cancel new pipelines right away your first week in office. This is why you have to send the investment signal to transition
yeah.
from a very clean, a lot cleaner crude oil than the rest of the world, but that's not the avenue they went, and it's giving all sorts of distorted signals.
Right. Right. Um, National Economic Council Director Brian Deese yesterday said that he recognizes the risk of the U.S. falling into a recession. Jim, he said there's no guarantee that it's going to happen, but he said there's always the risk.
Yes, well, at least he's honest in that regard, because you've had Treasury Secretary Yellen, who cynically, I say, when she says we won't have stagflation or recession, I up the odds that we will. I think she's
Right.
lost her credibility on it, and that's a shame. But this market is signaling a lot of problems ahead, Chip, not only in the U.S., but around the world. As I said before, the IMF is signaling this week that they're going to have to take another notch or two down under the GDP, gross domestic product, for a number of countries. And we're well not out of the woods relative to China's COVID so-called
Right.
zero COVID strategy, because once again today we wake up and they have an accelerated number of cases in some of the cities. So this is going to lead to more extended logistics problems that will take us into 2023. So all this adds up to a slower growth under the U.S. and a number of other countries. The U.K. is clearly headed for a recession, and probably Germany, and then it's gonna extend from there. Hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
I don't think you are either. Um, on the, obviously fuel prices play an important role in the inflation that we're dealing with. And the White House is exploring the possibility of tapping into an emergency diesel reserve. I didn't
Yeah,
know that we had an emergency diesel reserve.
well, I didn't know, but then I did recall writing the stories, Sandy Hook, that they tapped, or that maybe that's when they started it. I'm trying to find out how many gallons are in this, and I've not been able to. CNN broke this story. I'll give them credit for that one, but I really don't think that there's that much. So this is again another policy announcement, Chip, to show that they're trying different elements other than significantly increasing production of oil here.
Right.
And
Okay.
they better be worried about diesel and propane, because it's going to continue to hit later this year. And
Yeah.
that'll really be important for the ag sector.
Yep. No doubt. All right. Tomorrow marks 3 months since Russia launched into Ukraine. Cyborg has a question here. When will sinking ships in Ukraine conflict 9 equals canceling Paris Accord or Green New Deal? I'm not
Uh,
exactly sure where we're going there with this, but I think what Cyborg is saying is back to what we were talking about on the Green New Deal and so on, and the ESG uh, protocols that are out there. The I don't know what, I'm not exactly sure what side's getting at here.
well, all I know is relative to Ukraine, the G7 countries, and of course now Biden's over in Asia, they continue to talk about options, Chip. They want to get that 20 to 22 million tons of grain
Grain
out
out.
of Ukraine
Yeah.
into the marketplace. And again, I don't think it's a question of when that happens, if it's when and how, because increasingly the top officials of major countries, including Biden, they're worried about this food issue. And they know history shows that that can lead to a lot of developing countries conflicts within their countries. So I think that's at the top of the list for the next few months. And they're going to try to encourage countries such as India, Malaysia, Indonesia just to stop doing their up and down export bans. So this is going to be a growing story because you've got the Economist magazine talking about this front page story. You've got the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times of London. They're all focusing on this now, which tells you this is at the highest levels of a number of countries.
Right. Okay. Real quick for Melody, environmentalism versus climate change is not the same thing. And I agree. I agree with that. And from Bill, diesel and propane shortages will cripple transport, construction, manufacturing, and food. Lack of refining capacity is killing the USA.
Yeah, well, we're in the slow process of increasing refining capacity.
Yep.
And in the manufacturing sector, Terry, relative to logistics, that's underway, but it's going to take several years. And I agree, environmentalism, of which farmers, as we always say, are some of the best environmentalists. It's usually the 1% or less than 1% who get the media attention in any sector. So agriculture has a number of environmental type programs that they should be proud of. The CRP, the EQIP, and many others. And as I keep on saying, the new Farm Bill is mainly going to be evolutionary, but it'll be revolutionary in two areas: conservation program. You watch the attention lawmakers will give conservation program, both funding, technical help, etc., and on climate change, because the ag sector wants to believe Vilsack when he says climate mitigation, carbon mitigation can be the next revenue stream for agriculture, but we're it's just in the beginning ways of determining that.
Right. Very good. Jim, I think that pretty well wraps it up, doesn't it?
It does. We're on hold. We'll see how the cattle market's going to do with that bearish placements number. So we'll watch the market there. Hog market looks like it's continuing their seasonal early summer rally, and I'm getting ready for Vilsack on Thursday because he could break some news in a number of areas, Jeff.
Yeah, very good. Like I said on Friday in the free for all, the thing that I'm going to be watching this week is how much progress they can or can't make on getting that grain out of Ukraine.
Yes.
I think that's going to be a very important issue to watch this week.
Sure.
All right. Good work. This morning on AgriTalk, we've got Machinery Pete and Representative Sam Graves. Be sure to tune in for that. Have a great week, everybody. Keep watching for those signals.